Can you hear me? Oh, look at that. I was so afraid that they might turn on this microphone when we were singing. So I was just mouthing the words right there. And I do not sing at all. So thank you very much, worship team. And yeah, clap. My name is Bryan Cawthra, and that's a different name around here. Cawthra, you probably haven't heard of that last name, but I grew up in a small town in Tillsonburg, Ontario. Hey, we got some Tillsonburg fans, where the strap was alive and well. I was born in 1982, so my brother is about Pastor Brian's age, and I remember him getting the strap a lot. And so I don't know what happened. I should have lived in New Brunswick, or my brother should have, I guess, because he would have learned a lot of lessons the hard way, maybe. But anyways, we had the strap in Ontario. I'm not afraid to use it anymore. So just like Pastor Brian said, I have a whole bunch of straps by the doors that I gave the ushers. And if you're not coming down afterwards, there's going to be some straps, I think. But anyways, I digress from that. But yeah, I grew up in Tillsonburg, Ontario. And if you knew anything about me, I grew up in this small little church, Alliance Church in Ontario. Very conservative. Grew up in a Christian family my whole life. Grew up in the church, went to a Christian school, went to a Bible college, thought I was a Christian, said a prayer when I was 6 years old because my mom said, "Brian, do you want to burn in a lake of fire?" And I said, "No." So I said this prayer, whatever that means, right? And I thought I was a Christian. And I learned a lot of lessons in my life. And now I work for this company or this ministry called ShareWord Global. And if you've never heard of that, you've probably heard of the Gideons, right? So the Gideons International in Canada, we changed our name a few years ago to ShareWord Global. I'll explain why, but we got a quick video here that we're going to show you.
It was never just about Bibles in hotel nightstands or in the hands of fifth graders. It was about being faithful, to go into all the world and make disciples. It was about sharing. It was about bringing hope to the world, the only real hope there is. We're still all about those things, but we're no longer content to do it alone. We are ShareWord Global, a movement of people faithfully sharing hope with a world that desperately needs it. Join us. Together, we can tell the world.
And you can go to the next slide. That didn't explain a whole bunch, but the next. Yeah, so a little bit about ShareWord Global. So, I mean, Steve Tibbetts and Sue, I don't think there's any other Gideons here, is there? No, just you guys. So my parents, again, like everybody who knows the Gideons, Little Red New Testament, probably in grade 5, or a hotel Bible. And that's kind of what I knew as well. I moved from Ontario to actually come here to New Brunswick to work at Crandall University. And I didn't know anything about New Brunswick, didn't know anything at all about Crandall University. I just happened to like sports, and I went to Briarcrest College out in Saskatchewan, and I have a degree. I spent 4 years doing this in sports ministry. What's that even mean? I don't even know. There's no jobs in that, and they don't tell you that until after you graduate. They're like, come spend a lot of money doing something called sports ministry, and then go find a job. Well, there's none in Canada for that. So what I did was I just I love sports, and soccer was my main sport. And in Ontario, I did all these things called Athletes in Action, soccer camps. So we would partner with a church, put on a soccer camp, and tell kids about Jesus. And that's all I knew. And I remember the very first time even, what I'm going to talk about a little bit, that slide has nothing to do with this, but one of the things that I didn't really like doing was talking in front of people. It was my biggest fear. And now I'm here doing this as a job. But I remember when I first even started doing these soccer camps for kids, and I had to share my testimony with them, I was very nervous, and I would cry. I don't know if you guys have to do speeches when you were growing up in front of the class. Biggest fear. And I would just bawl, like snot, everything, just my eyes were disgusting. I didn't even know what I was saying. I wasn't doing a speech, I was reading cue cards. I was just like this with my head down. And that was my biggest fear. And God said, I'm going to make you do that for the rest of your life. And that's what I'm doing. So anyways, I moved from Ontario to work as the athletic director, one of the only jobs in Canada that I was actually qualified for with my 4-year degree, and work at a Christian university and use sports as a way to tell people about Jesus. So, packed up everything, me and my wife, we just got married a couple of years before that, moved to Ontario, moved from Ontario to New Brunswick to work at Crandall. Did it for like 3 or 4 years, and it was awesome. Then we had a kid, and the athletic director life doesn't really work out for kids because it's every evening, it's every Saturday, you're never there for family. So I said, I got to start looking for a new job. And lo and behold, the Gideons, my brother was actually working there in Ontario at our head office. And he was the vice president of finance, so he's an accountant. So I guess the strap worked. I don't know. But so he was there, and he's like, hey, Bri, do you want to post this job up around the university, which is the job I'm doing right now, which is called Regional Manager for Atlantic Canada. He said, yeah, post it up at Crandall. Maybe somebody will see it and apply. I said, sure. So I posted it up, and my brother's older than me, so I have to listen to what he says. So I did it, and then like a week or two later, he says, Bri, is anybody interested in that job? I said, nope, because it's the Gideons. Like, that's honestly, like, who's going to want to work for the Gideons, right? And he said, well, just leave it posted. He's like, why don't you apply? I said, Kev, my brother, I'm doing the only job in Canada that I'm actually qualified for. And I just moved here from Ontario, so why would I apply for this? He's like, just throw your name in the mix just for fun. And I said, sure, it's my brother. So I put my name in, filled out this little thing. I got a call immediately from the boss. He says, your dots, however your profile lines up, it match perfectly what we're looking for. I said, I don't even want the job. I told him, I said, I don't want it. And he said, no, we're flying out there, and we're going to come interview you. So boss comes flying out from Ontario, interviews me in a Starbucks right down the road from Crandall, and he's like honestly, before he interviewed a whole bunch of people out here, but before we even finished the conversation, he's like stops me in the middle of it. He's like, you're the guy for the job. Do you want it? I said, no, no. Like, honestly, I was trying to refuse this job because I only applied because my brother told me to. And I said, I don't want it. And I said, I have nothing to do with the Gideons. Like, I don't know anything about it. What are you guys even doing anymore? Like, I thought this ministry I didn't even know what was going on. Like, to be honest, so you guys can get me fired if you want later. But I had no idea. I said the only thing that actually stood out to me in that interview was when this boss guy was telling me about what they want to do in the future, which is what ShareWord Global is. And one of the main things that kind of stuck with me was, we want to partner with churches. And I said, that's exactly what I did for 15 years for soccer camps. I partnered with churches and helped churches get out into the community and go tell people about Jesus. Did that through soccer, because it's sports, it's something that's natural, it's something I get. So I said, if I don't have to, I actually said this in the interview. I said, if I don't have to speak in front of churches, if I don't have to travel, and if I don't have to go to the Gideon chapter meetings, then I'll take this job. He's like, well, pray about it and think about it. And I said, all right, I'll take it. And like, I was working for the Gideons now. I left Crandall University, and I had no idea what my job was. And for the first 2 or 3 years, I traveled, I talked in church, and I went to every single Gideon chapter meeting there was in Atlantic Canada. And I said, this is not what I want to be doing, right? I said, I want to be working with the churches. And that was the mission that they were really focused on. So what happened was the Gideons started going outside of Canada. So here in Canada, the Gideons look a lot different than they do all over the world. You can't see these are just 2 little magazines. One's called Hope and one's called Spark, but they don't have these outside of Canada. The Gideons outside of Canada don't do this. Only here in Canada have we now broken away from the Gideons and said, all right, we're going to come up with relevant ministry or relevant tools for people now. So rather than dropping off a Bible, let's have a conversation with somebody, and maybe one of these magazines might lead somebody to the Lord as well, but it's through that personal relationship. So what happened was ShareWord Global was getting big. So anytime we left Canada, we weren't allowed to be the Gideons. We had to come up with a new name, which is ShareWord Global. So now when we go to other countries, you'll see this logo everywhere. There's no Gideon stuff outside of Canada from us. We partner with churches, and we basically help those churches get out and grow. And that's what they're doing. They do the exact same training that we're going to offer here today. They take the exact same scriptures, but in their language, in their country, and they're going to go talk to people. And that's what I'm doing. And now I'm finally happy because I don't have to do all of the things I've been doing for 6 years, going to travel and go all over Atlantic Canada and lead all these chapter meetings and doing all these events and stuff. But I get to train people on how to do this. And that's what and especially churches. And I'm very excited about it. And Steve and Sue have been a part of this since we've been launching it a couple of years ago, right? I'm telling you, this is a game changer for our ministry. So I'm going to give you a little bit examples here. So just really quick before we get into the actual training part. So that's a little bit about ShareWord Global. We still do all of this. So you can still get Bibles, magazines, Gospels of John, New Testaments. Go to the next slide. We still have all of those, the expressions cards. So any holiday, like Mother's Day is coming up, Easter just was displayed. We have a card for every single holiday or occasion or anything, and all that money still raises, people donate money just to have the cards. That still all goes to all these Bibles and scriptures and everything. So the Gideons haven't changed much, but they really have. Like ShareWord Global is really a whole new ministry. So I would almost say the Gideons went from Bible distribution, which was, hey, let's place them in hotels, let's give them to grade 5, to relational evangelism. And that's two different ministries. One's distribution, and one is I have a relationship with you and I want to talk to you. So let's go to something called the grid evangelism, the next slide. So this is what we came up with a couple of years ago. There's a guy from Billy Graham Evangelism that he worked there for years, and he came over to the Gideons and ShareWord Global, and he works at our head office now. He came up with this training, and I'll tell you right now, this is simple. Right? Like I said, I grew up in a small church, Alliance Church, never said anything to anybody, sat in my chair, didn't talk to anyone. The only time I was ever comfortable talking to people was at soccer or at any sporting event, because that's just what I knew. I didn't go out of my comfort zone at all. I knew all of the Christian people. I went to youth group, right? Did all the Christian stuff that I always do. But I never actually applied something like this in my life. Simple, authentic evangelism skills that will engage your heart, head, and hands in daily routines as God transform your habits. So this training is actually modeled after Jesus. Isn't that crazy? Right? Like, who would have thought Jesus would have been a good example for something? Right? Well, we did. We figured that out. We read the Bible. We saw how he talked to people, and he didn't avoid them. Right? So I'll get into a few examples of what that looks like, but here's a quick video to tell you about what this looks like.
In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, or so, as you know, a certain book made clear to us. The heavens bring light, and yet darkness looms over all mankind, primarily because of the choices he has made. Jesus came to bring light to the darkness, giving hope, love, and redemption. Some 2,000 years after Christ left his permanent mark as part of God's plan to save humanity, the earth may seem darker than ever. But make no mistake about it, there is still power in the grid. The church is God's mission base for his people. The church thinks like a missionary, seeks to share the gospel, and, in the everyday routines of life, acts as a light in both word and deed to its neighbors. The church, therefore, is a light unto the world, shining in a way that gives glory to God. And darkness is and ultimately will be overcome by the light. The reach of the church is only made possible through its people in their everyday lives. The church models and reflects Jesus by identifying with its neighbors, making it personal by engraving itself on the community, participating and being active in the lives of others, communicating love, hope, and the redemption of the cross, presenting as ambassadors the message of hope. We are the church, and each one of us has a purpose: to be light, to go out into the world and make Jesus known. As a member of His church, you have a mission, and together we can tell the world. What is the mission, you ask? Your mission is to be a blessing. Your mission is to walk in the ways of the Lord. Your mission is to be a reflection of God. Your mission is to be different. Your mission is to live in response to grace. Your mission is to share God's good news. Your mission is to tell the world. A church can grow in many ways, but for your light to expand enough to illuminate a city, it happens through conversion. Ask yourself, who has God placed in your grid to serve and to reach out to? How will you communicate truth and light? God has designed the church, and more specifically, you as a member of the church, to be light in darkness.
So grid evangelism is a relational model that engages you in outreach conversations. Your grid is the network of people in your life with whom you regularly have the opportunity to engage in conversations. So relational and conversations, two things I hate. Like, I'm not even trying to be funny. I don't even like them. And I've learned, like I said, I'm doing this training and I'm learning from it as I go myself. So I still remember bringing my girlfriend at the time, who's my wife now, to our house for Thanksgiving for the very first time ever. My brother-in-law was there, my sister, everybody was there, our whole family. And my girlfriend at the time found out more about my brother-in-law than I knew in 5 years. In one meal, first time she ever met him. Why? Because she cares. I don't care. Like, I just don't. It's just part, like, and my wife hates that about me. I don't ask the engaging questions. I just very surface, unless it's about sports or the Maple Leafs, I don't care, right? I know the Leafs won last night, and some of you are thinking that in your head right now, right? He's a Leafs fan. I'm totally irrelevant now, so, right? But relational. I didn't have good relationships with a lot of people because I was afraid to actually talk to them and show any emotion or show, I just didn't want to be heard or whatever the reason was. People would tell me stuff, but I didn't care. Like, I'd be like, great, see you later, right? I know it sounds rude, and it sounds like, well, how's this guy even working for the Gideons, right? Anyways, it's conversations is the other thing I didn't like doing. It's just, man, people would come and talk to me, and I'd be like, ugh. I don't know if some of you are laughing, but this is honest truth. I don't know if you guys ever don't like having conversations sometimes, right? Or maybe you don't like getting into relationships with people. Very true for me as well, right? And I'm just telling you, if it can work for me, you guys are already probably way ahead of where I am. I'm 40 years old and I still don't like talking to people, right? But God puts you in certain situations, and just like we're seeing here, it's where you are. I have all of these neighbors now. So when we moved to Moncton, we could actually live in a house, because in Ontario, you can't afford anything. So we got to Moncton, got in really cheap at this semi-detached house. What we didn't know was anybody. I have no family there, no friends, didn't know any, only people at Crandall since I met them. That's the only people I knew. But we didn't know anything about the neighborhood. It was in the North End, and all of a sudden, we found out that there's all of these other families exactly the same as ours, just starting their families the same time. So there's 8 kids now in the backyard that are all the same age. It's like 8, 7, 6, 5, all the way down. And they all take care of each other. It's, there's no fences. Everybody goes out there, saves us a ton of time, a ton of babysitting. We can cook food, we can clean. It's awesome, right? So now our neighbors are our grid. And I still didn't want to talk to them, but now that I have kids, I have to talk to them because their kids are in my backyard, my kids are in their house. God made my kids make me go talk to people, including my neighbors. And I don't have a lot of things in common with them already, right? Other than one guy likes sports, I know that. Other than that, one guy is into everything different than I am. Their kids are into all the different things. And anyways, I got to know my neighbors. And long story short, I know a lot about my neighbors now because I'm being intentional And that's what this training is today. When we come downstairs, we're going to get your story, how you can get your testimony down to 3 words, which is crazy if you think about that. But how can you start talking to people intentionally? And that's what I'm being more aware of now, is saying, who's actually on my grid, or who's actually in my neighborhood that I'm avoiding? Because God put me here for a reason. And just like that song, I actually wrote it down here, when we were singing one of these worship songs, He walks with me and talks with me. Well, guess what? That might be you. You might be walking and talking with your neighbors, and you're Jesus to them, right? God put you in that neighborhood for some kind of reason, and how many of those conversations are we avoiding every single day because we don't have time, we don't want to get to know them, we just, whatever the reason is, right? Well, that's what we're here today to do, is how do we break down that fear a little bit? And again, like I said, I don't know my neighbors that well, but I've gotten to know them. One of the things that we do, and especially now that I work with the Gideons, or ShareWord Global, sorry, I say Gideons a lot, we're ShareWord Global, but is these Spark magazines. So my birthday is on Halloween, and of course, we're always going out and getting candy with the kids, but I thought, how could I flip that around? How could I actually get to talk to people rather than just take my kids trick-or-treating? So all I started doing was getting free hot chocolate from Starbucks, getting all of the candy and putting up a tent at the end of our driveway with these Spark magazines for kids. I said, take a free magazine, but in our street, it's super long, tons of kids, tons of young families, and we're right in the middle. And I said, all right, this is like a pit stop almost, right? And it's freezing. I don't know if it's freezing here, but in Moncton, it's freezing every single Halloween. It's cold. And they don't make Halloween costumes very warm. So I feel bad for the kids, but the parents come and get free coffee. So they stop. This is the pit stop. And I actually start talking to people that are there. They're like, oh, you guys are awesome. Now they know our house as the hot chocolate people. I don't care how they know us, but they know us, right? All of a sudden, these people now know me, and they're like, oh, my kid had that magazine. That's pretty cool. And I have a chance to give them a Hope magazine, or I have a chance to talk to them and actually start a relationship, which I totally would avoid if you know me at all growing up. I don't want to talk to people, right? But now I'm actually saying, no. I actually have a chance to actually have a relationship with somebody here on my street. And maybe there's a reason. And let me tell you what happened when I went to PEI. I was there 2 weeks ago in Charlottetown at one of the churches, again, doing something I didn't think I'd ever be doing, is preaching and talking in front of churches and training and all that stuff. But I get up there and I'm telling my story, and I'm talking a little bit about soccer and how much I love it. And the pastor actually had this book in his shelf, and I don't know if Pastor Bryan has a ton of books in his shelf, but a lot of pastors I run into have these libraries of books. I don't know if they read them or not. They're just there. They look smart, right? And anyways, so at the break, he goes over into his library of books, grabs one, comes to me and gives it to me. And he says, here's a soccer book. I'm like, why do you even have a soccer book? But he gave it to me. He's like, read it. It's really good. It's a professional soccer player from England that became a pastor. And he's like, I think you'd like it. I said, all right, sure. I didn't even look at it. As I'm driving back home from PEI to Moncton, I looked at the book, and it said Peacock. It was Gavin Peacock was the guy's name. I don't know Gavin Peacock, but I know only one Peacock that I've ever met in my life lives 2 doors down from me, my neighbor. Stephen Peacock. He's from England. So in my head, I'm like, oh, an English soccer player with the last name Peacock. Stephen's not a Christian. Stephen has 2 kids. All I ever talk to Steve about is, soccer. Steve just got laid off 2 weeks ago from his job. So Steve's at home, and he's got all this time now. And I got home, and I looked at it, and Steve's from Newcastle in England. And he talks about Newcastle Soccer Club all the time. That's all he ever talks about. If he's not outside, he's watching soccer, and it's Newcastle. And does anybody actually know Newcastle FC? Ever heard of it? Well, they just got bought by the richest people in the world, so now they have as much money as they could ever want. It's some oil company, and I'm sure it's not good, but they have a lot of money. And Steve tells me every single day how much money they have. He's like, we could buy Messi if we want. He tells me all of the stories about all of the players that they're going to get and how awesome they are. His life is Newcastle. So anyways, I get home, and I see that this Gavin Peacock guy played for Newcastle. And I don't know if that pastor knew that I had a neighbor that loves Newcastle, that's not a Christian, that I have a relationship with, that all he cares about is Newcastle, and his last name is Peacock. I don't know if God was telling me something here, right? Hey, Bryan, you're going to go to PEI, get a book with the last name Peacock from a Newcastle soccer player that used to be a professional, that's now a pastor, and your neighbor, who you've met and known for years now, loves Newcastle. So what do? I get home and said, I'm not reading this book. I don't like reading anyways, but I said, I think this book was for my neighbor. So I text my buddy, and I'm like, hey, have you ever heard of Gavin Peacock? He's like, yep. And he tells me all his stats, like in a second. He's like, 1980, he did this. In 1990, I'm like, all right, so you know him. He's like, yeah, he's a Newcastle guy. Of course I know him. So I walk over to Steve's house on Easter, and I say, hey, buddy, got this book for you. Tell him the story that this pastor gave it to me. I said, I don't think it's for me. I think this book is for you. And he's now laid off, and he's like, I've read it already. Like, text me in 2 days. He's like, I've read the book. I'm like, all right, what'd you think? He's like, it's awesome. Awesome book. So now I have another opportunity to talk to my neighbor because of this book that a pastor gave me in Charlottetown 2 weeks ago, right? And I actually played soccer with him last Tuesday, and he's already talking to me about that book again. And I'm like, God's going to do something in this guy's life. None of their families are Christians. None of our neighbors are Christians, actually. So I could tell you story after story of the exact same kind of things because I was being intentional about looking at who my neighbor was and looking for ways to actually talk to them other than sports. So if you look at the next one, the model, next slide here is small talk, personal talk, spiritual talk, gospel talk. Again, I'm not naturally good at conversations, but this is generally how a conversation flows. If you know me, like you guys don't know me, but I've told you a little bit about me. I stay at that top arrow as long as I can. Small talk. It gets awkward after a while. How's the weather? What'd you do yesterday? Right? That's a little bit more personal, actually. I don't even go that far. Right? But hey, small talk. All right, here's what are you up to? Cool. I'll see you later. Right? Like I don't dive into it too deep. And then my wife could spend hours doing these 4 things. Hours talking to you about, how do you get from here to here to here? Well, I've found out I'm not really good at getting it to a spiritual or a gospel conversation ever, unless I really, really try hard. And Pastor Bryan probably can attest to this, but as soon as you say I'm a pastor, it goes to spiritual or gospel talk quick, right? When someone says, what's your job? I said, well, I work for ShareWord Global. And they're like, what's that mean? Have you ever heard of Bibles in hotels? Conversation's over, all right? It's just, as soon as they find out my job, they're like, all right, see you later. But there's also circumstances in this where it's a tool that's actually useful, right? You say, well, what are you doing Sunday? Oh, I'm going to church. Well, what's that mean? Well, now you're in a spiritual conversation, right? So how do you get it from these, going through those 4 levels of conversations? We're going to get into that a little bit in the training. Here's a quick video to kind of explain it a little bit for you, and then I'll quickly run through the next couple things here before we go down for the next part.
The first step to having a spiritual conversation happens before you meet the person. That's because your best preparation is to spend time in prayer, talking to God, praying for the person He has in mind for you to engage with, and listening to the voice of the Holy Spirit. When you begin talking to people on your grid, there are 4 different levels of conversation you can have with them. You might not get to a spiritual conversation in the first encounter, but you can be ready with some questions to keep the dialogue moving towards Christ. Let's identify the 4 levels. You begin with small talk, and take it a little deeper into personal talk. From there, you shift into spiritual talk, and then you move toward conversion in gospel talk. Small talk is the first step in engaging with people. It involves light surface conversation about topics with minimal substance. There are basic observations and inquiries, mainly about what can be seen. It's always easiest to see what's on the surface. Personal talk is where you really start learning about the other person and sharing about yourself. You will find yourself asking more meaningful questions in order to build relationship. You can potentially begin to share a challenge or observe something that needs fixing. Spiritual talk involves discussing spiritual matters. It rises out of personal talk and cultivates future talks about the gospel. Spiritual talk seeks to understand what the other person feels about God and where they are at spiritually. It allows you to discuss religion in an impersonal way and attaches deeper meaning to one's personal values and beliefs. Gospel talk allows us to talk spiritually about our relationship with Jesus. A gospel talk introduces Jesus, identifies who he is, and what he did for us. A gospel talk delivers the good news of the hope, light, and reconciliation we have in Christ. As you talk to people on your grid, keep the 4 levels of conversation you can engage in the back of your mind. Being aware can help you look for entryways to more meaningful conversation and intentionally leading the topic to God and faith. Be sensitive to people's responses to topics of faith. The more you listen, the better you'll be able to understand their perspective. Gospel conversations are part of a growing process. In your life, you harvest the full fruit of the intentional interactions you have each day. Whether you realize it or not, every conversation has the potential to move to a gospel conversation. At all times, be ready to lead the conversation in a direction where God is brought up. It all starts with establishing good entry points. You'll want to spur great conversations by asking good questions, because the wrong ones can leave the person you're talking to disengaged or even turned off. Let's look at a few examples.
Yeah, so those are the kind of the 4 core skills about just having a conversation with people, connecting with them, telling people your faith story, sharing Christ's story, and giving them God's word. Those are the next sections that we'll cover over in the next part when we go downstairs after pizza. But if you want to skip 2 slides, actually, so go to the Jesus on the Grid one. There's 4 conversations. The next one, there you go. Using your Bible. So there's story after story. If you look in the Gospels at just conversations that Jesus had with people. And again, when I said this whole thing, the grid, is talking to people that you run into in your everyday lives, well, that's what Jesus did. And if you look at how he did that, didn't shy away from people. He had time for them. He served them. The picture is the woman on the well there. And if you just think about that story, right? Well, there's a lot of circumstances that went into Jesus talking to that woman that day, right? And that's kind of how it is on our grid too, where I'm thinking of just personally, where do I go every single week? Well, I have soccer 2 or 3 times a week. I go to Tim Hortons pretty much daily. There's grocery store, there's Costco, there's all these different things where I avoid people, right? That's my job, is just get in, get out, get back home. That's what I think about. And that's the opposite of what this training is. And I'm learning, like I said, I'm learning myself from this training. I'm not just here telling you I know everything, because I don't know anything. And what I'm trying to do is saying, hey, start being aware of the people on your grid. And I think even the worship team whoever, we were doing our little prayer there before, and somebody said, help us to be aware of people on our grid. And one of them, they actually mentioned people that play badminton or pickleball. Right? You might not think there's a gospel conversation that's supposed to be happening there, but guess what? It could lead to one. And I still remember the very first time I did this training with the guy that made this training, Derek. He put a slide up, and all it said was, every conversation you have is a spiritual conversation. That caused a lot of controversy in the training that day, right? Because people were sitting there thinking, every conversation I have is a spiritual conversation? Let's just try it right now. Put your hand up if you don't agree with that. Every conversation you have is a spiritual conversation. I don't agree. Put your hand up. Every conversation you have is a spiritual conversation. I do agree. Put your hand up. See, even here, it's split. And it really depends on how you look at that. Because I like most of you said, what do you mean? When I go to Tim Hortons and I say large double-double, Is that a spiritual conversation? Depends who you are, right? I don't think it is, but it has the opportunity to be a spiritual conversation because that lady's on my grid. Her name is Peggy, and I know her. I go to there. She knows our car. She knows that when we come through the drive-thru at Tim Hortons, we order 2 coffees, and we say, can we have a sleeve on it? We're very picky, right? So she just knows who we are. So we don't even have to say it anymore. She knows our order, so we don't even have to say sleeves now. And now we get to the window. Both of our coffees have sleeves on them. She says, has a great day, right? I don't see that's a spiritual conversation. But guess what? My wife and I shop because we're cheap. We're Dutch, right? So we shop at Frenchie's or Value Village sometimes. And also I work for ShareWord Global, so we don't make tons of money, right? Just kidding. We're fine. But we were at Value Village one day, and we saw Peggy, right? Out of context. She wasn't at Tim Hortons, right? We saw this lady that we recognized, but hadn't had a real conversation with because I just ordered coffee from her. But she was there with a kid around the same age as our kid. Well, guess what? We got something in common now, kids. So we go up to her. I'm like, Peggy, Tim Hortons. And how many people do you think she sees every day at Tim Hortons? Why would she even know me or care about me ever? Anyway, she's like, oh, yes, I know you, the red Jeep. I'm like, yes, red Jeep, yes. You guys have kids? I didn't know you had kids, right? All of a sudden, I'm into a conversation with Tim Hortons lady at Value Village because she's on my grid. Well, guess what? After doing this training, I realized, okay, well, there's 4 different things I want to try and identify here, right? 1, what do we have in common? 2, what's her name? How can I pray for her? And how can I serve her? Well, now I know she has kids. Even if she doesn't know that I'm praying, I could be praying for her family, right? I didn't see her husband. I don't even know if she has a husband. But she's on my grid, and for a reason, I go to that Tim Hortons. Now I have a reason to talk to Peggy. So next time I go to this Tim Hortons drive-thru, how's your daughter doing? All of a sudden, I'm a lot different than most people coming through the drive-thru that day. I asked her a personal question, saying, oh, that person knows I have a kid, right? Oh, yeah, our kid, well, one of them's sick right now. I told her the same thing. I'm in a conversation in the drive-thru window where people are probably mad at me because I'm actually taking time to get to know this person on my grid, right? Well, next time I don't go through the drive-thru, I actually go in the store, and Peggy's there. Well, I'm talking to Peggy now in the store, talking about our kids. Anyways, I have things to pray for Peggy now because she's on my grid, right? That's every single day. There's guys on my soccer team that have a Facebook group that we're all in there. I'm sending Christian rap songs to guys on my soccer team because they like rap. Well, this one guy's like, I love Eminem. Well, there's this Christian rapper called NF. He sounds just like Eminem. I send him all. He just came out with a new video, new album last month. I'm like, hey, buddy, guess what? Nate, he's got a new album. You want to hear it? I just sending him Christian rap songs. He loves them. Not a Christian at all, but he's like, he was asking me the other day, he's like, where do you get these Christian songs from? I'm like, oh, well, I hate to say it, but I'm a Christian, right? Like, you're almost nervous to say it because I only know this guy from soccer. So it's like, well, yeah, what does he know about me, right? So anyways, he's asking me about where do I get these Christian songs? So I tell him, oh, yeah, I go to this church, and I go to the Moncton Wesleyan Church. He's like, oh, what's it like? Is there babysitting? I said, yeah, there is babysitting, actually. I'm like, we drop our kids off for like an hour, and we have a coffee and just, sit and watch the service. He's like, that sounds awesome. Guess what? Nate, on Easter, dropped his kids off at kids' church and sat with us because it was free babysitting. Who cares how they come to church, but he's on my grid. I have a connection with him with soccer. All of a sudden, he wanted to come for free babysitting. So those are the opportunities that we're going to kind of get into here a little bit in the training, but one more quick video. It's called You or Me, and then I'll wrap it up.
You are me. Stick with us here for a minute, and we'll explain. I'm a me. You are a me. We are all individuals. So, only for the sake of this discussion, let's say you are a career Christian. You come from a churched background. You go to your 9-to-5 job, come home at the end of the workday, that's if you don't stop by the gym for a quick workout, eat, do the bare minimum housework to keep the home functional, Make sure your kids' lives are adequately sustained. Catch up on any one of or all the 50 apps on your smartphone that essentially now facilitate your entire life. Play some video games, watch some TV, go to sleep, rinse and repeat, day in, day out. And aside from some vacation time here and there that you either do something or nothing with, that is basically the essence of your existence. A life that is centered on and wrapped up in me. Picture now meeting we. Getting more involved in your community. Being more absorbed in church life. Embracing the outside world a little more, which also embraces you. Getting to know others around you just a little better, bit by bit, and they, in turn, becoming more and more familiar with you. They see the type of person you are, your traits, your strengths. Probably without even realizing it, change takes place. You move from operating within a self-centered existence to living a life with a little more purpose. This, in very simple terms, illustrates moving from me to we. Community means becoming a part of something greater than yourself. See? We'll get to see a little later. So, what is your grid? Your grid is your community. We believe that how a church acts with its community and how its people engage with its grid is extremely important if we want to effect change for the kingdom. The people within your immediate reach are your reach. That's your calling. In your life, you have unique connections with people. Even your ordinary routines hold opportunities to present the message of the cross. If you were to map it out, where do you come into contact with people? How can you find ways to share the good news with them? When you think about reaching out to others who may not know Christ, it's easy to forget that you already have a deep well of pre-existing relationships in place. That's a great starting point. Think through all the people in the various grids of your life. Think not only of those who you constantly come across in the flesh, but also in your expanded digital and social media sphere. Who are they, and what do you know about them? How can you get to know them better? Identify people in your sphere of influence who might not know Christ, but who you come into contact with often. Write their names down in the provided space in the workbook. Remember, once you've established who those people on your grid are, there are 4 key questions to consider. What do I have in common with them? How can I pray for them? How can I serve them? What can I give them? There are a number of passages in the Bible that comprise the basis for this approach.
You can skip this part in the video. There's a lot of passages there. And then the next 3 slides, so connecting with people, telling your story, sharing Christ's story. Those are the next parts we're going to cover downstairs after the pizza in this workbook part here, so you actually get a chance to try it. And I know this probably doesn't happen at KBC, but sometimes when the pastor gives a great message, really moved by it, you're excited about it, and then you go home and forget it. That doesn't happen here, all right? I know it doesn't. But I want to give you a chance to do this training and actually experience it. So come downstairs. We've got lots of more stories. We've got pizza. It's a Baptist church. There's free food. I mean, why would you not be there? So I'm going to pray for you, and then the worship team is going to sing the last song. And then we're going to line up, and I think Pastor Bryan will probably tell you the details. But let me pray. So, dear Lord, we just thank you for today. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be used by you on our grid, Lord. You have plans, you have stories for every single one of us. You've brought us through so much, Lord, and help us to just be Jesus to the people that surround us in our neighborhood. I just pray for this church, Lord, as they go out, that they would just continue to be light here in their city, in their town, and to their neighbors. And I just pray for the opportunities that we would take them and just trust that you have a plan and your Spirit would guide us, Lord. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.